Gravity Falls, a show of humor, mystery, and casual viewing. Unless you're me. My name is Christian. You're probably wondering why I'm dressed as Dipper Pines and about to rewatch the entire series. Rest assured, there's a perfectly logical explanation. Alright, now we'll move on to Headhunters, and the basic premise of this episode is that it's kind of like a murder mystery episode, which is really, really cool. This is an episode that was inspired by the Simpsons episode, Who Shot Mr. Burns, and Alex Hirsch really just wanted this episode to kind of show more of the town and more of the town's people, and we definitely get introduced to a lot more characters for sure. We get introduced to the character of Chandra Jimenez, who's a news reporter for the Gravity Falls Action News, and then we get introduced to a couple of minor characters. We get introduced to a character named Tats, who's like this big kind of bouncer character, a bunch of like tattoos all over him. And then we get introduced to a biker character named Bats Biker, which is pretty much stabbed backwards because he has a tattoo on his arm that says Bats, just because, you know, Disney didn't want to have a character that had the word stab on his arm on a tattoo. So the creators just kind of flipped it around and made his name Bats. So I think that was really fun. We also get a few other Easter eggs, like the show Ducktective, which is kind of like a parody of a Sherlock Holmes show starring a duck. And Ducktective will definitely be a show that kind of reoccurs throughout the series as it goes on, and kind of sets up the fact that this is going to be a murder mystery episode. And we also get another scene with Blandon. We get a scene earlier in the episode where Stan decides to reopen the wax museum, and he makes a big announcement to the townspeople of Gravity Falls, but everyone's bummed out because he promised that there was going to be free pizza at the event, but clearly he was just lying to them just so he can get their money. And then in the background you can see Blandon picking up Dipper's shoe. But yeah, pretty much the basic premise is that Stan is reopening a wax museum in the Mystery Shack, and then one of the wax figures melts, so then Mabel kind of takes it upon herself to make her own wax figure, and then she actually makes a wax figure of Stan. But then the next day they go into the parlor room and see that the wax Stan's head has been cut off. So then it becomes a murder mystery to figure out like who's the one who did it. And the reason why it was a wax figure is because obviously Disney wouldn't allow an actual character to be killed off. So they figured that having like a wax character would be perfectly fine. So it all kind of worked out in the end. So then Dipper and Mabel are kind of on the case to figure out who's the one who murdered wax Stan. So they kind of go around the town asking people questions, and definitely becomes like a classic kind of murder mystery whodunit kind of story. But then eventually the twins realized that it was actually the wax figures who murdered wax Stan, because they were actually trying to go after the real Stan, because Stan decided to close up shop on the wax museum, so he locked him up for about 10 years. And then slowly but surely the wax figures were kind of trying to plot their revenge on Stan once they were freed. And then we get introduced to a bunch of wax figures like wax Sherlock Holmes, wax Larry King, wax Coolio, wax Nixon, and then a bunch of other wax figures. So then the episode kind of ends with Dipper and Mabel kind of battling the wax figures and then realizing that they can kind of destroy them by, as Mabel calls them, hotty melty things. So then Dipper and Mabel have their battle with all the wax figures and eventually get rid of all of them. Dipper also gets into a fight with wax Larry King and decapitates him. Dipper has his battle with Sherlock Holmes, and eventually the sun rises and then he melts. And it won't be the first time that Dipper's seen a melting character on top of the roof, but we'll get to that. And then we have a funny line at the end where Dipper and Mabel are trying to explain to Stan the whole thing that happened with the wax figures. Where at first Mabel says, "Your wax figures turned out to be evil, so we bought them to death." And then Dipper says, "I decapitated Larry King," which is really, really funny. And then we also have an end credit scene where Mabel's trying to decide between two different sweaters, and one of them ends up being a llama sweater, which will definitely become very important later on. And so Mabel asks for Dipper's help, and then we get wax Larry King's head coming through the vents, and then he says, "The llama one. Llamas are nature's greatest warriors." And then Mabel's just like, "Oh, thanks, Dipper." And we also have a cryptogram that translates to "He's still in the vents," referencing the fact that wax Larry King's head is still in the vents, who's chasing after a rat that stole his ear. But yeah, overall this is a pretty good episode. Definitely introduced a lot more main characters, and we got to see more of the town and a couple more of the locations. And one of the revelations that we had is the fact that Stan is like so mournful of the loss of this wax figure that is similar looking to himself, and that's definitely kind of like more of a hint to this kind of mystery behind Stan's identity. So yeah, we'll definitely get to more of that as the series goes on for sure.